I felt the scalding coffee seep through my silk blouse, the burning sensation spreading across my back as gasps echoed around LeBlanc's elegant Sunday brunch table. My mother, Eleanor Preston, stood behind me, still holding the empty coffee pot, her perfectly manicured hands steady and her expression cold as ice. "Mom," Amanda, my younger sister exclaimed, though I noticed she made no move to help me. "Typical, my name is Jennifer Preston, and at 32, I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon at Boston General." Yet sitting here, coffee dripping down my back, I felt like I was 16 again, the constant disappointment, the family embarrassment, the one who never quite fit into the Preston mold. "Eleanor," my father murmured, barely looking up from his eggs Benedict, "was that necessary? Was that necessary?" Not "Are you okay, Jennifer?" or "What the hell are you doing, Eleanor?" Just a mild query about necessity. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. "Completely necessary," my mother replied, setting the empty pot down with a delicate clink. "When your daughter refuses to help save the family business, preferring to play doctor instead, this is what she deserves. Play doctor, right? Because performing life-saving heart surgeries was just a game." I stood slowly, coffee dripping onto the expensive restaurant carpet. The other patrons were staring now, phones discreetly raised to capture the Preston family drama. My mother would hate that. Appearance was everything to her. "Jennifer, sit down," she hissed, finally showing a crack in her perfectly poised demeanor. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene." I kept my voice level, professional, the same tone I used when delivering difficult news to patients' families. "You just poured scalding coffee down your daughter's back, because she wouldn't abandon her medical career to take over your failing boutique chain." "Failing," Amanda interrupted, her perfectly glossed lips twisting into a sneer. "Just because you're too selfish to help." "Failing," I confirmed, reaching into my purse. "Would you like to see the proof?" My mother's face paled slightly. "What proof?" I pulled out a folder, the real reason I'd agreed to this brunch. The audit reports from the last 3 years, the hidden accounts, the loans, the properties mortgaged to cover mounting debt. I placed each document on the table, watching my mother's composed mask crack further with each revelation. "How did you," she started, "get these?" "Unlike Amanda's business degree, from that online college you pretend is prestigious, my education taught me how to research properly. When you started pressuring me to take over the business, I did my due diligence." The table fell silent. Even my father looked up from his plate, his face ashen. "You're lying," Amanda said, but her voice wavered as she glanced at the documents. I smiled, though my back was still burning. "Am I? Is that why Mom's been desperately trying to convince me to take over? Not because I'm suddenly the daughter she's proud of, but because she needs my surgeon's salary to bail out her sinking ship? That's enough." My mother's hand came down hard on the table, rattling the crystal glasses. "How dare you spread these lies, Mrs. Preston?" A new voice interrupted. We all turned to see the restaurant's manager, looking concerned. "We've had complaints about the disturbance. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave." My mother's face flushed red. Public embarrassment, her worst nightmare. "Of course," I said smoothly, gathering the documents. "We were just finishing." "Oh, and Mom." I turned to face her, ignoring the pain from my coffee-soaked blouse. "You might want to hold on to what's left of your coffee. You're going to need it when the SEC investigators call about those hidden accounts." I walked out of LeBlanc with my head high, leaving my family sitting in stunned silence. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "You've destroyed this family." "No," I thought, carefully peeling off my ruined blouse and retrieving the spare set of scrubs I kept in my car. They had destroyed themselves. I had simply refused to go down with them. As I changed, I caught my reflection in the car window. For the first time in years, I didn't see the family disappointment looking back at me. I saw someone stronger, someone who had finally stood up to years of manipulation and abuse. My phone buzzed again. The hospital. "Emergency cardiac surgery needed." I smiled, starting my car. Time to go play doctor. This was just the beginning. My mother's coffee stunt had given me the perfect opportunity to expose everything I'd discovered. And trust me, the audit reports were just the tip of the iceberg. The burn marks on my back took 2 weeks to heal, but the satisfaction of exposing my mother's schemes, that felt better than any soothing ointment. Let me take you back to understand how we got here. Growing up as Eleanor Preston's daughter meant living under a microscope of constant criticism. While Amanda was groomed to be the perfect socialite daughter, I was the disappointment who preferred science books to social events. "Jennifer, darling," my mother would say, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Wouldn't you rather attend Amanda's debutante ball than study for that silly biology test? The answer was always no, and each refusal deepened the divide. When I got accepted to medical school on a full scholarship, my mother didn't even bother to pretend to be proud. Instead, she focused on Amanda's prestigious online business degree, which I later discovered she'd bought with family money. The real trouble started 3 months ago, when I received an unexpected call from my mother. "Darling, we need to discuss the family business," she'd said, her voice unusually warm. "I think it's time you took your rightful place in the Preston legacy." I nearly dropped my phone in shock. After years of being the family outcast, suddenly I was worthy of the Preston legacy. Something didn't add up. That's when I started digging. As a surgeon, attention to detail is crucial, and I applied those same skills to investigating our family business. What I found was staggering. Preston Boutiques, once the crown jewel of New England's luxury retail, was hemorrhaging money. My mother had taken out massive loans, mortgaged properties, and created a web of hidden accounts to keep up appearances. The prestigious Preston name was built on a foundation of debt and deception. "Dr. Preston." My thoughts were interrupted by Sarah, one of my surgical residents. "The SEC investigators are here. They'd like to speak with you about the documentation you provided." I nodded, taking off my surgical gloves. I'd sent copies of everything to the authorities the day after the coffee incident. My mother's attempt to humiliate me had backfired spectacularly. My phone buzzed. Amanda again. She'd been alternating between threats and pleas since that Sunday. "The investors are pulling out," her message read. "Mom's having a breakdown. How could you do this to us?" I thought about the countless times they'd hurt me. The graduation dinner they skipped for Amanda's yoga retreat. The time my mother told a potential date I was damaged goods because I prioritized my residency over socializing. The years of subtle and not so subtle emotional abuse. But what really sealed their fate was what I discovered last week. Hidden in those financial records was evidence that my mother had been embezzling money from my grandmother's trust fund, money that was meant for her medical care. Grandma Rose had been moved to a more affordable facility last year. "She doesn't know the difference anyway," my mother had said dismissively. Meanwhile, she'd been using that money to fund Amanda's lavish lifestyle and cover the boutique's mounting losses. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about justice. "Dr. Preston." Sarah appeared again. "Your sister's here. She's making quite a scene in the lobby." Of course she was. Taking a deep breath, I headed to the hospital lobby. Amanda stood there in designer clothes that probably cost more than a nurse's monthly salary, mascara running down her face. "How dare you come to my workplace?" I said quietly, leading her to a private corner. "How dare I? How dare you?" she hissed. "The board is suspending Mom pending investigation. We're going to lose everything." "No, Amanda, you're going to lose everything you stole. There's a difference. We're family." "Family?" I laughed bitterly. Was Mom thinking about family when she poured coffee on me? Were you thinking about family when you helped her drain Grandma's trust fund? Amanda's face paled. "You know about that." "I know everything. The fake invoices, the hidden accounts, the diverted funds. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? I'm the disappointment who got into medical school, remember? We can fix this," she pleaded, grabbing my arm. "Just tell the investigators you made a mistake. We'll give you a share of the business." I gently but firmly removed her hand. "There won't be any business left to share, Amanda. The SEC doesn't look kindly on years of financial fraud. Then you'll have nothing too. No family, no inheritance." "I have my career," I interrupted. "My skills, my integrity. What do you have besides Mom's stolen money?" The look on her face told me she'd never considered that question before. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Security will show you out," I said, turning away. "Oh, and Amanda, don't come back here again. Unlike Mom, I won't settle for just coffee." As I watched security escort my sister out, I felt no satisfaction, no joy, just a quiet certainty that I'd done the right thing. The Preston legacy of lies was about to come crashing down, and I had front row seats to the show. My pager beeped. Another emergency surgery needed. Real work saving real lives. Let my mother and sister deal with the consequences of their actions. I had more important things to do. 1 year later, I stood in front of the prestigious Boston Medical Conference, preparing to deliver my keynote speech about groundbreaking cardiac surgery techniques. The irony wasn't lost on me. Exactly 1 year after my mother tried to humiliate me with hot coffee, I was being honored as one of the youngest leading cardiothoracic surgeons in the country. The headlines about my family had finally died down. Preston Boutique's empire collapses amid fraud charges. Socialite Eleanor Preston faces criminal investigation. Mother-daughter duo charged with trust fund embezzlement. My mother and Amanda had both pleaded guilty to reduced charges, avoiding jail time but facing hefty fines and community service. But the real justice came when Grandma Rose was moved back to a premium care facility, her restored trust fund ensuring she'd receive the best possible care for the rest of her life. Dr. Preston, my assistant, touched my arm. "They're ready for you." I walked onto the stage, facing hundreds of medical professionals. In the front row, I spotted Sarah, now my head resident, beaming proudly. Next to her sat my father, looking older and somehow smaller in his now outdated suit. He'd reached out to me 3 months ago, after my mother and Amanda's sentencing. We met at a small coffee shop, neutral territory. The irony of coffee wasn't lost on either of us. "I failed you," he'd said simply, his hands trembling around his cup. "I failed you every time I stayed silent, every time I looked away. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I know that now." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. We'd been having monthly dinners since then, slowly rebuilding something that resembled a relationship. "Distinguished colleagues," I began my speech. "Today I want to talk about courage. Not just the courage it takes to open someone's heart and hold their life in your hands, but the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it costs you everything you thought you needed." The audience listened intently as I shared my innovative surgical techniques, but I knew the subtext of my words reached deeper. Sometimes the most important cuts we make aren't in the operating room, they're the ones that separate us from toxic relationships and harmful patterns. After the standing ovation, as I was gathering my materials, my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "Saw you on the medical conference live stream. Mom would hate how successful you've become. I'm proud of you, and sorry." I stared at the message for a long moment. Amanda was serving her community service hours at a homeless shelter, and rumor had it she'd actually discovered she had a talent for helping others when she wasn't focused on appearances and status. "Nice speech, Dr. Preston," Sarah said, approaching with my father. "Though you failed to mention the time you performed emergency surgery right after having coffee dumped on you." My father flinched, but I laughed. "Some stories are better left for the memoir." "Speaking of coffee," my father said hesitantly, "would you like to grab some? I mean to drink, not to." He trailed off, embarrassed. "I'd like that," I replied, gathering my things. "But Dad, I'm buying." As we walked out of the conference center, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the glass doors, a successful surgeon and her recovering father, both learning how to build something new from the ashes of what was lost. My phone buzzed again. The hospital. One of my patients needed emergency follow-up care. "Go," my father said, understanding in his eyes. "Save lives. That's who you always were, who you were meant to be." "I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." I hugged him quickly before heading to my car. The burn scars on my back had faded to almost nothing, but I kept them as a reminder, not of the pain or humiliation, but of the moment I finally stood up and chose myself. Eleanor Preston had tried to break me that Sunday morning, thinking she could force me back into the box she'd created. Instead, she'd given me the push I needed to break free completely. As I drove to the hospital, I smiled at the paper coffee cup in my holder. These days, coffee didn't remind me of that horrible brunch. Instead, it reminded me of early morning rounds, of late-night surgeries, of lives saved and boundaries protected. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives become our greatest catalysts for change. My mother had called me trash and tried to break me. Instead, she'd helped me realize my true worth, and that was worth all the coffee in the world.